Chapter 1. The Gathering at Blackwood Grange. The English countryside lay softened under the last hues of evening. Fields rolled away into a haze of mist, while the tall chimneys of Blackwood Grange exhaled faint threads of smoke into the pale sky. The house itself stood grand and aloof, its ivy-clad stone catching the final glimmers of light. A carriage crunched over gravel, its lamps swinging as it drew toward the entrance. The occasion was unusual. Lady Evelyn Blackwood had contrived a novelty she called a midnight tea. Guests were to assemble in the drawing-room at 11 o'clock, dine on sandwiches, petit fours and tea, and strike the hour of midnight with their cups in hand. To some it seemed whimsical, to others eccentric, but Lady Evelyn, elegant and composed, insisted it would be a tradition remembered in society. The great hall glowed with light, servants moving with quiet haste, and one by one the guests were received. Sir Alister Blackwood, the master of the house, greeted them stiffly. Tall, grey at the temples, his nose sharp and voice authoritative, he seemed a man accustomed to command and little patience for trifles. At his side, Lady Evelyn, nearly 20 years his junior, smiled, with a charm that seemed carefully arranged rather than spontaneous. Their daughter Clara, pale and reserved, arrived from upstairs a few minutes later. Her dark eyes were unreadable, her words few, yet there was a faint curve to her lips that suggested she observed far more than she revealed. Dr. Julian Westcott, the village physician, jovial and red-faced, bustled in, shaking hands heartily and laughing rather too much at his own remarks. Beside him entered Miss Harriet Vale, a writer of crime stories whose sharp gaze lingered upon details others overlooked. She carried a slim notebook, as though even a social gathering might supply her with inspiration. Mr. Thomas Fenton followed, smooth in manner, deferential towards Sir Alister, yet conspicuously attentive to Lady Evelyn. His smile lingered too long, his compliments too polished. Last came Reverend Charles Mortimer, the vicar, mild and nervous, wringing his hands as though burdened with anxieties he could not confess. The drawing-room at Blackwood Grange had been arranged with exquisite taste. Porcelain cups painted with delicate sprays of violet stood upon gleaming trays, while dishes of scones, sandwiches and sugared fruits filled the air with fragrance. A fire burned in the grate, its glow reflecting in polished wood and silver. Conversation began with easy civility. Lady Evelyn presided with poise, encouraging talk of books, politics and travels. Yet beneath the surface there were small fractures. Sir Alister's brusque rebukes toward Clara drew a flush to her cheek. Lady Evelyn's eyes never quite met her husband's. Fenton's admiration, though masked in gallantry, was almost brazen. Miss Vale, pen scratching, noted every flicker of discord. As the evening advanced, the clock crept toward the appointed hour. The servants withdrew discreetly. At 5 minutes to 12, Lady Evelyn rose, her gown catching the lamplight. "My friends," she said, her voice bright, "we shall drink to midnight. They say it brings luck." Cups were raised, hands steady or trembling, faces lit by the glow of lamps. The clock began its solemn toll. Each chime echoed through the silent room. Clara's lips pressed into the faintest smile, her gaze fixed not upon the tea, but upon her father. The final stroke sounded. At that instant Sir Alister, who had been speaking in measured tones, gave a strangled gasp. His hand flew to his throat, his eyes widened, and his cup slipped from his grasp, shattering upon the carpet. Tea spread in a dark pool. "Father!" cried Clara, leaping up. Lady Evelyn gave a stifled scream. Dr. Westcott rushed forward, bending to touch wrist and throat, his ruddy face drained to an alarming pallor. "He is gone," the doctor said, voice hoarse. "Sir Alister is dead." For a moment the room was frozen. Then came confusion. Lady Evelyn sobbing into her handkerchief, Clara standing rigid as marble, Fenton muttering incoherently, the Reverend whispering broken prayers. Miss Vale bent over her notebook with almost feverish speed, recording the scene even as it unfolded, and so, at the hour meant for celebration, Blackwood Grange was struck silent by death. Chapter 2. The Shadow of Death. Panic swept through the drawing-room like a gust of wind rattling every flame in its path. The neat array of cups and plates lay forgotten. The fire hissed as a log shifted, and all eyes turned upon the still figure of Sir Alister sprawled upon the carpet. Lady Evelyn knelt beside him, her hands trembling. the lace of her sleeve brushing his lifeless arm. "Alistair, speak to me, please." Her voice was shrill, broken with disbelief. Clara stood apart, rigid, her face drained of colour yet strangely composed. She looked not at her stepmother, but directly at Dr. Westcott, whose hands were still upon her father's throat. "It was so sudden," murmured the Reverend Mortimer, wringing his hands helplessly. "God forgive us, but one moment he spoke, and the next—" "Poison," Miss Vale declared abruptly, her tone crisp, her eyes narrowing like a cat scenting prey. "Mark me, this has the touch of design. Sudden seizure at the moment of a midnight toast?" Too neat to be chance, Hastings, startled by the author's bluntness, hastened to intervene. "Steady on, Miss Vale. The doctor will know best." Dr. Westcott rose heavily to his feet. "It is not apoplexy, of that I am certain. His colour, the convulsion, the collapse, it points rather to a violent agent. Yes, I should say, poison." A murmur rippled through the group. Lady Evelyn pressed her handkerchief to her mouth, her sobs muffled. Fenton's eyes flickered nervously from her to the untouched cup on the table. Clara's hands clenched tightly, at her sides. "We must send for the authorities at once," Hastings declared. "This is a matter far beyond our control." "Indeed," Miss Vale agreed with a sharp little nod. "But you will find, Captain Hastings, that in such matters confusion abounds. Evidence trampled, statements contradictory. Ah, it is precisely the stuff of tragedy. If only—" She broke off, her glance darting toward the door as though she half expected someone to enter. Hastings felt a curious tightening in his chest. How often had he stood at such a threshold before, with the same clamour of voices, the same aura of shock? How often had that familiar, unmistakable figure entered then? The small, neat man with the extravagant moustaches, whose sharp eyes missed nothing. Yet this time Poirot was absent. Hastings was left uncomfortably to steady the storm. "Listen to me, all of you," he said firmly. "No one is to leave this room. We do not know what has happened here. If Sir Alistair has indeed been poisoned, then the method must be discovered, and for that we must preserve every detail exactly as it is." It was the soldier in him that spoke, and to his relief, the group obeyed. Chairs scraped back, people resumed their seats, uneasy, subdued. Only Clara remained standing, her gaze fixed upon her father's body with a dark, unfathomable expression. "Inspector Graves must be sent for, Doctor," Westcott muttered, mopping his brow. Yes, it falls under his jurisdiction. But mark me, Hastings, the man was not prepared for this sort of crime. Poisoning in the dead of night. The whole village will ring with it." "I will go myself," Fenton volunteered, his voice eager. "The constable is but a mile down the road." "I can fetch him here within the quarter hour." Hastings hesitated, then nodded. "Very well. But hurry." The door closed behind Fenton, and in the heavy silence that followed, Miss Vale's pen scratched once more across her notebook. "It is remarkable," she said softly, "how swiftly the mask of civility can shatter. A gathering for tea becomes a stage for death. I should not be at all surprised if every one of us harbours a secret strong enough to kill." Lady Evelyn lifted her head, her eyes flashing. "How dare you, madam?" My husband lies dead, and you speak as though we were in one of your novels." Miss Vale inclined her head, unruffled. "Perhaps we are, Lady Blackwood. Life imitates art more often than we allow." The fire crackled in the grate. Somewhere, a clock ticked inexorably toward the small hours. Hastings stood by the window, staring into the darkness of the drive, waiting for the faint gleam of a lantern that would signal the arrival of the law. He could not shake the sense that Poirot's absence was temporary, that somewhere the little Belgian detective would hear of this midnight death and come, immaculate and unhurried, to unravel its secrets. And Hastings, for all his attempts at order, felt an uneasy certainty deep within. The night at Blackwood Grange had only just begun. Chapter 3. The arrival of Hercule Poirot. The heavy tread of boots and the jangle of a lantern chain announced the return of Mr. Fenton with Inspector Graves, a broad-shouldered man whose expression was as dour as the grey moustache bristling above his lips. The constable followed at his heels, and behind them, most unexpectedly, came a smaller, neater figure wrapped in a travelling coat, a valise in one hand and his hat held precisely in the other. "Mon cher Hastings," cried Hercule Poirot, his voice cutting through the gloom like a bright note in a dirge. But what is this? You stand guard by a corpse, and yet you do not write to me to say vite vite. Come quickly. Hastings sprang forward, half with relief, half with astonishment. Poirot! What on earth are you doing here? Poirot placed his valise delicately upon a chair and removed his gloves. Each finger tugged free with meticulous care. I am here, mon ami, because Lady Evelyn Blackwood engaged my services some weeks ago. A trifling matter. She spoke of letters, of a certain unease in the household. I thought perhaps a little consultation might soothe her fears, and now— He spread his hands with a flourish toward the lifeless figure on the floor. Eh bien, it seems I arrived not too late, but precisely at the hour when I am most required. Inspector Graves, clearly ruffled, cleared his throat. This is a police matter, Mr. Poirot. Sir Alistair Blackwood is dead, and we have every reason to suspect foul play. I cannot have amateurs meddling in my case. Poirot turned, his dark eyes twinkling under arched brows. Amateur, you say? But no, I'm a professional of the most particular kind. And if the lady of the house engaged me, perhaps, Monsieur l'Inspecteur, you will allow me at least to observe? Graves, though gruff, was not without pragmatism. Very well. But mark my words, I'll have no foreign tricks upsetting my methods. Poirot inclined his head gravely, though Hastings saw the faintest flicker of amusement cross his lips. The household gathered once more, subdued now, their faces pale in the lamplight. Poirot moved among them like a conductor before an orchestra, arranging his thoughts before the music began. He paused by the body of Sir Alistair, kneeling with a neatness that contrasted oddly with the grim sight before him. His fingers traced the broken porcelain cup, the dark stain spreading across the carpet. He sniffed delicately at the rim, then at the damp fibres. Tea, he murmured. Yes, but not only tea. His eyes flicked up to Hastings. Do you recall, mon ami, when we dined at that little restaurant in Soho, and the sauce was bitter because the cook had mistaken sugar for salt? A small detail, but it made all the difference. Here, too, there is a bitterness, subtle but not natural. He rose, brushing invisible dust from his knee. Poison, beyond doubt. Inspector Graves muttered his agreement, though with a shade of resentment. Dr. Westcott said the same. But the question remains, who administered it? Poirot clasped his hands behind his back and began to walk slowly round the room. Each guest stiffened as his gaze alighted upon them in turn. Let us consider, he said softly. The cups were all served together. Each of you drank, yet only Sir Alistair fell. This tells us something important. Either his cup alone was tainted, or the poison was given to him beforehand, in some manner not shared by the others. Clara, standing stiffly near the mantelpiece, spoke for the first time. You mean someone here deliberately chose my father's cup and poisoned it? Poirot bowed slightly. It is one possibility, mademoiselle. Lady Evelyn gave a shuddering sigh. But who could do such a monstrous thing? In my own home, in the midst of my friends. Ah, madam, Poirot said gently. It is among friends too often that such things occur. Enemies are obvious, they carry their hatred openly. But friends, they smile and they conceal, yet the concealment cannot last. Always the truth escapes in the smallest gesture, the smallest word. Miss Vale, her pen poised once more, asked with a bright keenness, Then you will solve it, Monsieur Poirot? You will tell us which of us has played murderer at the midnight tea? Poirot's moustaches twitched. Patience, mademoiselle. First, we must listen. We must observe. The truth, she's like a shy bird. One does not rush at her. Non. One waits. One tempts. One watches. Inspector Graves ordered the constable to guard the doors, forbidding anyone to leave. Poirot nodded approvingly. Très bien. Now, Inspector, shall we begin with the statements? One by one, each will recount what they saw, what they did, what they know. And I? He tapped his forehead lightly. I shall listen with the little grey cells. He seated himself with perfect composure, his eyes bright, his posture erect. Come, my friends, he said softly. We're about to begin. Chapter 4. The First Questions. The circle of guests sat tense beneath the mellow lamplight. Outside, the night pressed close against the windows, and the house seemed to listen as Poirot folded his hands neatly before him. We will begin, he said, with what is most simple, the order of events. Each of you will tell me in your own words what you saw, what you did, and what you drank. Be precise. La précision. It is everything." Inspector Graves leaned back heavily in his chair, notebook poised, though his eyes were narrowed as if he doubted Poirot's manner of procedure. Hastings sat nearby, pencil in hand, his soldier's sense of order prompting him to note every word. Poirot's gaze fell first upon Lady Evelyn. "Madame," he said gently, "you are the hostess." "You will begin." Lady Evelyn raised her, handkerchief to her lips, her voice low but steady. "I arranged the tea service myself with the assistance of my maid Agnes. The cups were set upon the tray, each poured from the same pot. I passed them around as the clock neared midnight. Sir Alistair was standing by the hearth. I handed his cup to him myself." Poirot inclined his head. "And you, madame, you drank also?" "Yes," she whispered. "I drank." "We all did." "Bien. And you noticed nothing strange? No taste, no bitterness?" She hesitated, then shook her head quickly. "Nothing. The tea tasted as it always does." Poirot's eyes moved to Clara, who still stood apart, her pale face shadowed by the flicker of the fire. "Mademoiselle Clara, you observed your father closely, did you not?" Clara's lips curved into that faint, inscrutable smile. "I always observe him." He held the cup a moment as though reluctant. He drank, but only a sip. Then he fell. "Did you drink your tea also?" "Yes," she replied. "It was bitterer than usual. I thought perhaps the leaves had steeped too long." I said nothing. Inspector Graves scratched a note with his pencil. Poirot merely tapped his finger lightly against his knee. "Dr. Westcott?" Poirot's voice was brisk. The physician shifted in his chair, mopping his brow with a handkerchief. "I drank as the rest did. Mine seemed perfectly ordinary. When Sir Alistair collapsed, I rushed to him, of course, but it was hopeless from the first. His pulse ceased almost at once. And you, Miss Vale?" The authoress looked up from her notebook, eyes alight with a strange excitement. "I drank. It was sharp on the tongue, yes, but I am accustomed to bitterness. One grows so when one writes of murder." I noted Sir Alistair's hesitation. He was never a man to relish company, least of all such contrived festivities. I thought it mere impatience, until he fell. Fenton shifted uneasily in his seat, smoothing his moustache. Yes, I drank. Perfectly normal, as far as I noticed. Lady Evelyn was speaking at the moment, and I confess, I was more occupied in listening to her than in tasting the tea." Poirot's brows rose faintly. "Nevertheless, monsieur, you drank it all?" "Yes, every drop at last." The Reverend Mortimer raised his head, his voice tremulous. "I too drank. I found it bitter, but I said my prayer over it, and the bitterness seemed less. I remember the clock striking, the solemnity of it, and then the cry." His hands twisted together. "God forgive us, I cannot put from my mind the look upon Sir Alistair's face." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the faint hiss of the fire. Poirot sat motionless, his eyes half closed, as though each word spoken played itself again before him in some inner theatre. Then he opened them sharply. "So, we have one pot poured equally, yet some speak of bitterness, others of none. Curious, is it not? And Sir Alistair, he tasted only a little, and it was enough." Inspector Graves grunted. "It proves only that the poison was strong and quick." "Or," said Poirot softly, "it proves that not all the cups were the same." He rose, walked to the tray, and examined the remnants of the service. 6 cups stood empty, one overturned, its shards scattered. Poirot bent low, picking up a fragment with delicate fingers. He sniffed, frowned, then set it aside. "It is as I thought," he murmured. "The bitterness was not evenly shared. Some cups were safe, one was not." His gaze swept once more around the room, lingering upon each face in turn. "Therefore, the question is this. Who had the opportunity to prepare the poisoned cup, and who had the certainty that it would be taken by Sir Alistair and no other?" Lady Evelyn gave a low gasp. Clara's eyes glittered darkly. Fenton shifted again, his collar damp. Poirot straightened, his moustaches sharp as sabres. "We advance, messieurs et mesdames. Slowly, carefully, we advance Chapter 5. Red herrings." Inspector Graves, with a grimace that suggested both weariness and suspicion, snapped his notebook shut. "It seems to me, Mr. Poirot, The thing is clear enough. The cup was placed in Sir Alister's hand by Lady Evelyn. Who else had the means? Who else had the chance? I am not fond of theories when the plain facts stare one in the face. Lady Evelyn gasped, colour rising sharply in her cheeks. Inspector, how dare you? You suggest that I killed my husband under the eyes of all our guests. It is monstrous. Poirot lifted a hand, calm, precise. One moment, madame. The inspector is zealous, perhaps, but zeal must be tempered by the method, n'est-ce pas? We must not leap to conclusions. Nevertheless, Graves pressed, she admits she poured the cup, handed it to him, and she alone ensured he drank from it. If the poison was in that cup, her guilt is beyond dispute. Hastings bristled. But see here, Inspector. Lady Evelyn drank from her own cup, which was poured from the same pot. If the poison had been in the tea, she would have been just as dead. Unless she took care to choose, Graves retorted. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Exactement. That is the question. Did she choose? And if so, how did she know which cup would be taken by Sir Alister? But let us not forget. Others too hovered about the tray. He moved with delicate steps toward the hearth where Clara stood, pale and statuesque. Mademoiselle, you say the bitterness was strong upon your tongue, stronger than others found it. How curious. Might it be, perhaps, that your father's cup was not the only one touched with poison? Clara lifted her chin, her dark gaze unwavering. You think I poisoned him, Monsieur Poirot? That I would do such a thing? My father treated me with coldness all my life, yes. He spoke of disinheriting me, of leaving everything to his second wife. Do you think? I did not know. But if I had wished him dead, why should I wait for a midnight tea with witnesses gathered around? Why not in his study, where he sits each evening with his brandy? Why not by simpler means? Poirot inclined his head slightly. An excellent defence, mademoiselle. It is true, if one seeks secrecy. But sometimes the bold stroke succeeds because it is the least expected. Still, we do not yet say it was you. We merely observe Dr. Westcott cleared his throat loudly, his face glistening under the lamplight. You are chasing shadows, Monsieur Poirot. The truth is, Lady Evelyn had the sole opportunity. You waste time with fanciful suspicions. Poirot turned sharply to him. Tiens, doctor, you are very certain of what is truth and what is waste. Why so? You drank, yes. And you, a man of science, you did not taste the bitterness others spoke of? The doctor stammered. No, I tell you mine was ordinary. Poirot's gaze lingered on him a moment longer, then passed on. And you, Monsieur Fenton? You say you scarcely noticed the tea. Being distracted, Fenton shifted uneasily. Yes, that is true. I was engaged in conversation with Lady Evelyn. If my cup was bitter, I did not remark it. Distracted, yet you drained your cup entirely. That is curious also. Poirot's moustaches twitched. Perhaps we must look to motives as well as cups. Sir Alister was a man of property, whose fortunes are tied to his will, whose business to his investments, whose future to his favour or his displeasure. The Reverend Mortimer murmured, Surely, Monsieur Poirot, we are not all to be suspected of greed and hatred. Sir Alister gave generously to the parish. He was not beloved, but he was respected. Poirot smiled faintly. Ah, Monsieur le Vicaire, in my experience, the respected are killed as often as the despised. The difference is only in the mask people wear. The silence that followed was heavy. Only Miss Vale broke it, scribbling in her notebook with a kind of avidity. At last she looked up, her eyes bright. I see what you're doing, Monsieur Poirot. You cast suspicion upon each of us in turn, weaving a net that grows tighter. But surely you must know already who it is. Poirot bowed slightly. I know many things, mademoiselle. But the murderer, he is clever. He wishes us to think one thing when the truth is another, so we must beware the red herrings, those false trails laid to deceive. He looked once more to Inspector Graves, whose jaw was set in grim determination. We cannot at this moment arrest Lady Evelyn. To do so would be premature. We must gather more. Details, timings, gestures. Ah, yes. For it is in the small things, the trifles, that truth resides. Poirot's voice dropped, almost to a whisper. The murderer is among us, that I am sure. But which of you it is, that, mes amis, remains to be seen. Chapter 6. The clue in detail. The hours had crept. toward dawn, yet none had left the drawing-room. The fire burned lower, casting long shadows that danced upon the walls. Poirot, his poise undiminished, moved with the same neat precision as if he had just arrived, his little eyes darting here and there, his hands gesturing delicately as he bent to examine the tea service once more. "Let us consider carefully," he said, his voice calm yet carrying to every corner. "There is a fact which has not yet been given its due weight. Lady Evelyn tells us she poured from one pot, yet some found the tea bitter, others not at all. This is not chance, it is design. Voila, here lies the heart of the matter." He lifted one of the empty cups, holding it to the light. "Examine closely, Hastings. Do you see? A faint residue clings here at the rim, darker than tea alone should leave. The cup was dusted, subtly, invisibly to the eye of the careless. The poison was not mixed in the pot, but applied selectively to one or more cups." Hastings leaned closer, squinting. "By Jove, Poirot, you're right. But then, how could anyone ensure that Sir Alistair alone received the poisoned cup? Just a ment. That is the subtlety, mon ami. One cannot be certain, unless one controls the moment of delivery." Lady Evelyn handed the cup to her husband with her own hand. "Yes. Yet consider, were there not others who lingered close enough to exchange, to suggest, to influence?" His eyes turned to Clara. "You, mademoiselle, remarked that your father hesitated, as though reluctant. Why so, unless he suspected? And if he suspected, why did he still drink?" Clara's voice was steady, though cold. "Because he was too proud. My father would never refuse what was set before him. He would rather die than appear weak." Poirot's moustaches quivered faintly. "An insight most profound. You knew your father well." He turned suddenly to Doctor. "Westcott. Tell me, Doctor, when you knelt to examine Sir Alistair, did you notice aught upon his lips? A trace of colour, a stain?" Westcott blinked, caught off guard. No, I did not look for such." There was no time. Poirot's gaze sharpened. No time? Yet a doctor must always look. It is his habit, his instinct. "Curious, very curious." Inspector Graves grunted. "You mean to say the physician himself may be mixed in this? That is preposterous." "Nothing, mon cher inspecteur, is preposterous until it is disproved." Poirot bent again over the tray, lifting a small silver spoon. He studied it minutely, then held it aloft. "Ah, regardez, a smear, faint but telling, at the bowl of the spoon. Who handled this last?" Lady Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth. "Agnes, my maid. She stirred the cups before I carried them in. But she is no poisoner. She has been with me for years." Poirot smiled thinly. "Perhaps. Yet the hand that stirs may not know what powder it carries. A pinch added beforehand, placed upon the spoon, and when it is dipped, voila!" The deadly dust dissolves. Miss Vale leaned forward, her eyes glittering. "But then the question is, who prepared the spoon? Who tampered with the tray before it entered the drawing-room?" Poirot bowed to her. "Precisely. That is the question." It is in this detail, mes amis, that we draw nearer to truth. He replaced the spoon with the utmost care, his expression thoughtful. Someone here had not only motive, but knowledge. Knowledge of where the tea would be poured, which spoon would be used, which cup would be chosen. A plan so delicate it must be the work of one who thinks not rashly, but with the tête bien froide, the cool head. The fire sputtered. Outside a cock crowed faintly, heralding the grey of dawn. Yet inside the air remained tense, each guest watching Poirot as though the smallest twitch of his moustache might reveal the murderer at last. Poirot settled into his chair, fingertips pressed together. "We are close now. The little detail, it is always the key. Soon it will betray the hand that dealt death at the midnight tea. Chapter 7 lies unveiled." The dawn light crept pale and uncertain across the curtains of the drawing-room, throwing into sharp relief faces haggard with fatigue. Poirot, however, appeared as composed as ever, his immaculate attire unrumpled, his moustaches unbent, as though the night had been but a pleasant diversion. "Now," he said softly, "we come to the moment where the truths, they begin to emerge. Already I see contradictions. They are small, yes, but les petites choses always betray the larger falsehoods. His eyes rested on Fenton. "Monsieur, you told us that in the moment of drinking you were absorbed in Lady Evelyn's words, that you scarcely noticed the tea. Yet Lady Evelyn herself tells me she addressed no remark to you at all, but to the company at large. Was it distraction or invention?" Fenton's lips parted, colour mounting his cheeks. Well, perhaps I misremembered. The moment was confused." "Confused?" Poirot repeated, his tone silken. "Or convenient? You see, Hastings, the memory of the liar," he tapped his temple, "she falters at the smallest test." Fenton swallowed, glancing toward Lady Evelyn, who did not return his gaze. Poirot shifted suddenly, his eyes fixing on Doctor. "Westcott. And you, Doctor. You were most insistent that Lady Evelyn alone could have managed the poisoning. Why so eager, Hayne? Unless you wish to divert suspicion from yourself." Westcott gave a strangled laugh. "Absurd! I was with the others the entire evening. My hands never touched the tray. Tiennes. But earlier you said you examined Sir Alistair immediately, yes? You bent over him, touched his lips, his throat. Yet just now you claimed you had no time to notice anything unusual. Which is it, Doctor? Did you examine with care, or did you avert your eyes from what they might reveal?" The physician's ruddy face turned, blotchy. "You twist my words." I was distraught. Any man would be. Poirot inclined his head gravely. "Perhaps. Yet the truth remains. You contradict yourself." Clara's voice cut through the tension, low and clear. "Why not admit it, Doctor? You owed my father money. Everyone knows it. He was about to call in the debt. You stood to lose everything." All eyes turned. Westcott spluttered, his handkerchief shaking. "A trifling sum. Exaggerations. Your father was not an easy man. He pressed all who crossed him. But murder? Never." Poirot's gaze softened, almost pitying. "Money, pride, resentment. They are motives enough. But we do not yet condemn. We merely observe." He turned then to Clara herself. "Mademoiselle, you spoke earlier of bitterness in your tea. Yet no one recalls seeing you drink more than a sip. Is it not true that you placed your cup down almost at once?" Clara's eyes gleamed, dark as jet. "I did. And is that a crime? Perhaps I wish to keep my wits about me. Unlike the rest of you, I had no wish for gaiety that night." "But you remarked your father's hesitation, how he held the cup as though reluctant. You noticed what no one else did. Why? Because you were watching him closely? Or because you wished to see the effect of your work?" A sharp intake of breath ran round the room. Clara's smile was thin, ironic. "You speak as though you already know the truth, Monsieur Poirot. Perhaps you do, but if you accuse me, you must prove it." Poirot bowed slightly. "Mais oui, proof is the thing. Without it, suspicion is nothing." It was then that Lady Evelyn, her composure cracking, rose suddenly. "You all stand here and accuse one another while my husband lies dead upon the floor. Have you no shame? He was harsh, yes. Cold, yes. But he was my husband. And you—" Her gaze fell on Clara, blazing now with passion. "You hated him. Do not deny it. You hated him, and you would see him gone." Clara's lips curved faintly. "Perhaps. But hatred does not always breed action, Lady Evelyn. Sometimes it is content merely to wait." The room chilled at the words. Miss Vale's pen scratched furiously upon the page, her eyes darting to Poirot as though urging him to speak. Poirot lifted a hand. "Enough. The truths are breaking through like weeds through stone. Already we see the lies, the half-truths, the evasions. But patience, mes amis, the murderer. He grows uneasy. Soon, very soon, he will betray himself." He settled once more into his chair, fingertips pressed together, eyes gleaming. The little grey cells. They are arranging, they are assembling. And soon the picture will be complete. Chapter 8. The breaking point. The pale morning light filtered through the heavy drapes, dull and cold, casting long stripes across the carpet where Sir Alistair's body still lay, covered now with a sheet. The room smelled faintly of extinguished candles and spilled tea. No one had slept. The air was close, heavy with fear and unspoken recriminations. Poirot, perfectly composed, sat with his fingers steepled, his gaze moving from one face to another. He spoke quietly, almost gently. "We have heard much. We have seen the small contradictions, the evasions. Now we must press further. For beneath civility there lies truth, and truth," she is impatient. She wishes to emerge, his eyes fixed on Lady Evelyn. "Madam, you are the widow. I must ask, was your marriage a happy one?" She flinched as though struck. "How dare you—" "Please," Poirot interrupted softly. "There is no need to act. The truth will serve better. Sir Alistair was difficult, a man of authority, accustomed to command. Perhaps also a man of jealousy." Her lips trembled. For a moment she looked to Fenton, then away. "He could be cruel," she whispered. "Not in blows, he never raised a hand, but in words, in suspicion, in constant reminders that everything I had, I owed to him. He accused me of vanity, of frivolity. He accused me," her voice caught, "of caring for another." All eyes turned instantly toward Fenton, who shifted, his collar damp, his hand nervously smoothing his moustache. Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Monsieur Fenton, you and Lady Evelyn, friends, perhaps closer than friends?" Fenton gave a strangled laugh. "Nonsense. We were friends, certainly. I admired her spirit, her refinement, but never anything improper." "Yet Sir Alistair believed otherwise," Poirot said softly. "Belief, it can wound as deeply as fact." Fenton's gaze dropped. Lady Evelyn pressed her handkerchief to her lips, silent tears slipping down her cheeks. Poirot let the silence stretch before turning suddenly to Clara. "And you, mademoiselle? You despised your father for what he threatened, to disinherit you, to cast you aside. You wished him dead, perhaps more than any of us here. Yet still you stand aloof, calm, composed, while your stepmother weeps. Why so cold?" Clara's eyes flashed. "Because I will not play the hypocrite, Monsieur Poirot. Yes, I despised him. He sought to punish me for my independence, to control me even as he doted on his new wife. But hate does not make me guilty. I have lived too long with his disdain to waste tears on him now." The Reverend Mortimer stirred uneasily. "Child, such bitterness. It is dangerous to the soul." Clara gave a brittle laugh. "Do not preach to me, Reverend. You knew him too. You all did. None of you loved him." The words fell like stones into still water. Hastings shifted uncomfortably. Even Inspector Graves, usually blunt, looked momentarily unsettled. It was then that Dr. Westcott, mopping his brow, blurted out, "He had enemies enough in business. Why must it be one of us? Any rival, any debtor could have slipped in, tampered with the tray. Why, even a servant—" Poirot's head snapped toward him, eyes blazing. "Ah, at last, the mask slips. You speak of enemies, of debtors. You fear, Doctor, that your own dealings will be laid bare. Shall I tell them? Yes, Sir Alistair held your note for a considerable sum. He intended to expose you, to ruin you. Is it not so?" Westcott's face blanched crimson. How do you know?" Poirot tapped his temple. "The little grey cells, Doctor." They know Westcott sagged into his chair, defeated, muttering incoherently. The others stared, aghast. Poirot rose, his small figure suddenly commanding the entire room. "We approach the truth. One among you murdered Sir Alistair with deliberation. You hoped the confusion of the midnight toast would shield you, but lies cannot conceal forever. Already we see the cracks. Soon one of you will break entirely." As though on cue, Lady Evelyn gave a strangled sob. She rose, her hands trembling, her voice choking. "I cannot bear it. This house, these accusations. It is too much. He tormented us all, yes, but I swear before God I'm innocent." Poirot's gaze rested on her a long moment. Then softly, "Perhaps, madame. Or perhaps you protest too much." The room froze, the air electric. Someone, Hastings thought, was about to shatter. The truth hovered, fragile, just beyond reach, and Poirot, with the patience of a hunter, waited for the moment when the quarry would reveal itself at last. Chapter 9. The Trap. The morning sun now stood higher, spilling through the tall windows in pale shafts of light, yet the chill within the drawing-room remained unbroken. Poirot had requested the doors be closed once more. The household, weary and anxious, Gathered in a semicircle while he stood by the mantel, his small figure precise, his expression unreadable. "My friends," he began, "it is time we bring order to the chaos. Last night Sir Alistair Blackwood met his death. Each of you has given your account, yet each account conceals as much as it reveals. Lies, omissions, half-truths, they litter the path like leaves before the wind. But order, toujours l'ordre, must be made. So, let us reconstruct." He raised a finger, as though conducting a lesson. At 11:55 Lady Evelyn poured the cups, with the help of her maid beforehand. At the stroke of midnight, Sir Alistair drank, hesitated, and fell. Some of you tasted bitterness, some did not. That contradiction is the key. It means that not the pot but the cup itself was tampered with. Bien. But who ensured that he, and no one else, would drink from it? Inspector Graves shifted impatiently. "We've been through this." Lady Evelyn placed the cup in his hand. Who else could ensure it? Poirot inclined his head, then spread his hands. And yet she too drank from a cup poured from the same pot. To poison him in that manner would be to risk her own life, unless— she relied upon the difference of taste. But she did not remark it. No, it is not so simple. Someone prepared one cup in advance, knowing it would reach Sir Alistair. He let his gaze sweep the group, his voice soft but cutting. "Now, I've arranged a little test. Each of you, please, place your hands upon the table." They hesitated, exchanging uneasy glances before one by one obeying. Poirot stepped forward, his sharp eyes darting from hand to hand. Lady Evelyn's trembled faintly, her rings flashing. Clara's were long-fingered, pale, steady. Fenton's drummed nervously. The Reverend's clasped together, knuckles white. Miss Vale's smudged faintly with ink. Dr. Westcott's damp, restless, nails chewed. "Parfait," murmured Poirot. "Now, if I were to say that the residue upon the spoon was not invisible, not entirely, but left the faintest discoloration, one that clings still to the skin of the one who touched it, what then?" A collective gasp ran through the room. Fenton's hands snatched back instinctively. Lady Evelyn's gave a small twitch, but Poirot's gaze fell instantly on Dr. Westcott. The physician stammered, "This is absurd! You cannot—" He broke off, seeing Poirot's eyes fixed steadily upon the faint greyish mark near the base of his thumb. "Ah, doctor," Poirot said gently, "you see, the trap is sprung. You handled the spoon when you thought none observed. You left upon yourself the trace you cannot wash away." Westcott's breath came quick, ragged. "No, I merely adjusted the tray as it was carried in. The maid stumbled." Poirot shook his head slowly. "Non, the maid did not stumble. I questioned her before I entered here, in the servants' hall. She recalls nothing of the kind. You, doctor, prepared the spoon before it ever left the pantry. You dusted it with your little powder, confident that Sir Alistair's cup would receive it. He was always served first, was he not? By Lady Evelyn's own hand? Yes. You relied on the custom of the household. Exact, precise, deadly. Lady Evelyn gasped aloud, covering her face with her hands. Clara's eyes blazed, though whether in triumph or horror, none could tell. Fenton muttered an oath, while Miss Vale's pen scratched furiously. The Reverend Mortimer whispered, "Dear Lord, it is true." Poirot lifted his hand for silence. But wait. A murderer, when cornered, will always resist. Watch Westcott's face, crimson and blotched, twisted with desperation. He half rose, hands gripping the table. Yes, he ruined me. He held my debts. He threatened to disgrace me. Do you know what it is, to be mocked by a man like him? To have your life's work reduced to dust? He left me no choice. His voice cracked, then fell into hoarse silence. No one moved. Only Poirot's calm voice broke the stillness. There is always a choice, Doctor. But you chose the coward's way, to kill unseen, with poison, at the moment of conviviality. For that the law will judge you. Inspector Graves stepped forward at last, his face grim. Julian Westcott, you are under arrest for the murder of Sir Alistair Blackwood. Westcott slumped back, all fight gone from him. The room exhaled, the trap sprung, the mask torn away. Poirot adjusted his cuffs delicately, his expression unreadable. Voilà, he murmured. The truth. she is revealed. Chapter 10. The Revelation. The silence in the drawing room was like the stillness after a storm. Dr. Westcott sat hunched in his chair, his face ashen, his hands trembling. Inspector Graves barked instructions to the constable, who moved forward to place a heavy hand upon the doctor's shoulder. The weight of the accusation had fallen, yet still the atmosphere pulsed with unease, as though some part of the truth remained unspoken. Poirot, standing very straight before the hearth, regarded them all with his usual calm. His voice, when it came, was measured, deliberate. We have seen the trap sprung, yes, we have heard the confession, but one question still lingers in the air. Why was this manner chosen? Why the theatre of the midnight tea, when simpler opportunities abounded? He turned his gaze upon Westcott. Doctor, you wished Sir Alistair's death. He held your debts, he threatened your livelihood. For months you sought a chance, but you, being a man of appearances, feared the scandal of exposure. Poison, silent and discreet, seemed the perfect tool. Yet why risk the presence of so many witnesses? Westcott's voice was hoarse, broken. Because he mocked me in public. He called me incompetent before my patients, before the parish. He said he would drag my name through the courts. I wanted him to fall, not in secrecy, but before them all. I wanted the proud Sir Alistair to collapse in the very moment he thought himself most secure. A murmur ran round the circle. Lady Evelyn lowered her hands from her face, her eyes filled with horror. Clara's lips pressed into a hard line, as though she drank in every word. Poirot lifted a finger. Ah, but even in your bitterness you made one miscalculation. You believed the bitterness of the poisoned tea would pass unnoticed in the moment of celebration. But others tasted it. Clara, Miss Vale, the Reverend. Had they spoken more loudly, had they refused their cups, suspicion would have fallen on the service at once. You relied on chance, Doctor, and chance she is a most unreliable accomplice. Inspector Graves gave a curt nod. It'll be the gallows for you, Westcott. Clear as daylight. Not quite, mon cher inspecteur, Poirot interjected. His eyes glinted. There is one more piece. All eyes turned back to him. Poirot stepped delicately toward the tea tray, lifting once more the faintly smeared spoon. This was the weapon, yes. But how did I know it was the doctor's hand, and not another's? Because only the doctor, in the confusion, placed himself close enough to tamper without notice. Only the doctor, when he examined the body, had the perfect pretext for any trace of powder upon his skin. And only the doctor, who spoke so swiftly of poison, betrayed knowledge before the others dared suspect. He replaced the spoon with the care of a priest laying down a relic. Thus the circle is complete. Motive, means, opportunity. They all point one way. Lady Evelyn gave a sob of relief. Then it was not I. Thank God. Clara's smile was thin, bitter. Yet you did not grieve him, Lady Evelyn. None of us did, Poirot regarded her gravely. Perhaps not. But grief and guilt are not the same. Remember that, Mademoiselle Miss Vale, her notebook filled, spoke with a kind of hushed reverence. It is extraordinary. The detail, the deduction, the unmasking. I could not have written it better. Poirot allowed himself the faintest bow. Mademoiselle, life. She is always the greater dramatist. At last Inspector Graves signalled to his constable. Westcott, broken, was led from the room. The others sat in silence, each lost in thought. Poirot, adjusting his cuffs, spoke softly into the heavy air. It is done. Justice, she will take her course. But remember, mes amis, a man is not murdered by poison alone. Pride, resentment, jealousy. These too are the poisons of the soul. Sir Alistair sowed them freely, and in the end he reaped their harvest. The fire crackled softly, the only sound in the great room. Poirot turned toward Hastings, his moustaches sharp, his eyes serene. "Come, mon ami," he said. "There is nothing more to be done here. The little grey cells, they have had their exercise, and now they rest." Chapter 11. Reflection. The household of Blackwood Grange lay quiet at last. Outside, the lawns glistened with dew, the spring sun rising over hedgerows alive with birdsong. Within, the great rooms, once filled with tense voices and the clatter of midnight tea, now stood hushed, the servants moving softly, as though unwilling to disturb the heavy silence left behind. Hastings and Poirot walked together along the gravel path that curved away from the house. The inspector had departed with his prisoner. Lady Evelyn had withdrawn upstairs, Clara had vanished into her chamber, and the Reverend had remained to offer prayers for the dead. Only Miss Vale had lingered, her notebook clasped like a trophy, her sharp eyes glittering with the thrill of a story she would one day shape. Now, away from all of them, Hastings at last exhaled. "Well, Poirot, I must say, another devilish business neatly tied up. I should never have guessed Westcott. He looked as shaken as the rest when the baronet collapsed." Poirot smiled faintly, adjusting his gloves as they strolled. "Mais oui, that is the essence of poison, mon ami. It is the weapon of the seemingly innocent. A knife, a pistol. They are noisy, violent. But poison," she whispers. "The hand that pours it can still tremble. The voice can still cry out in horror. Only the detail betrays he tapped his temple. The residue on the spoon, the contradiction in the doctor's words, the eagerness with which he pointed suspicion elsewhere. All these are the threads. Alone, they are nothing. Together, they form the whole cloth." Hastings frowned thoughtfully. "And yet, it might just as easily have been Lady Evelyn. Even Clara with her cold hatred could have done it. I cannot help but feel, well, that justice is served, but unhappily so." "Unhappily, yes," Poirot agreed softly, "for here is the truth. No one in that house was free from bitterness. The baronet, he inspired no love, only fear, envy, resentment. His death was planned by one, but wished for by many. Such is often the case, Hastings. One strikes, but the soil has been well prepared by others' hatred." They paused by a stone bench overlooking the meadow. Poirot seated himself with neat precision, drawing a cigarette case from his pocket, but leaving it unopened. "Do you know, mon ami, why such crimes fascinate me?" Hastings gave a short laugh. "Because they give you the chance to exercise those famous little grey cells of yours?" "Ah," Poirot chuckled softly, "that is part. But more than that, it is because murder is not only a matter of blood and poison, but of the soul. Each time it reveals what lies beneath the pleasant masks. Vanity, greed, jealousy, despair, they are the true weapons." The poison in the cup is only the instrument. For a moment he grew grave, his gaze distant. And so, Hastings, one learns to be cautious with the human heart. To underestimate it is folly. The passions, they can drive a man, or a woman, to acts most terrible. The sun had climbed higher now, warming the stone at their backs, gilding the fields beyond. Hastings drew in a long breath. "Well, Poirot, at least it is over. The Blackwoods may never recover their peace, but the murderer has been caught. I dare say you will be remembered in that house as the man who brought order to their chaos." Poirot rose, brushing an invisible speck of dust from his sleeve. "Perhaps, mon ami. But I ask not to be remembered. It is enough that the truth was seen, and that order was restored. The rest, pah, is vanity. And vanity, you know, is a dangerous thing." They began to walk again, the crunch of gravel beneath their feet. Hastings glanced at his friend, struck once more by the contrast between the small, fastidious figure and the weight of the intellect it carried. Poirot, immaculate and contained, yet had pierced through the veils of lies to expose the beating core of human malice. And as they left Blackwood Grange behind, the detective lifted his head toward the morning sun. His moustaches gleamed faintly in the light, and his voice, quiet but firm, carried across the still air. "Come, Hastings. The case is ended. The little grey cells, they may rest, but only for a little while. For always there will be another crime, another puzzle, another soul betrayed by its own weakness. Such is the world, and such is Hercule Poirot,